Steve Budd is a man of many talents and many jobs. He is an actor, writer, speaker, storyteller, stand-up comic, college English instructor, and award-winning solo performer. Steve is a member of the Dramatists Guild and the National Speakers Association. He's also a recovering sales professional, having sold real estate, business reference guides, and advertising. At age 8, he started preparing for this presentation. That was when he became a big fan of origin stories. His first was Rudyard Kipling's How the Camel Got His Hump. You're about to learn exactly how origin stories set us apart from our competition. Don't worry, you don't need help. If you need help perfecting yours, Steve does rent out his brain to mere mortals like us. He helps business professionals perfect our origin stories. If you want a conversation, just email him for a quick conversation. So get your jazz hands ready to sell us on the concept, origin stories, the heart of your marketing message. Please enthusiastically welcome Steve Budd.
Have you guys heard the one about the 2 San Francisco roommates who were short on rent money? Ever been there? Well, these guys knew a design conference was taking place nearby and that hotel rooms were hard to come by. They were like, maybe some of those out-of-towners might be willing to rent a bed from us. Like many 20-somethings, they didn't have much furniture, so they put out a couple of air mattresses for their guests. Voila, Airbnb was born. Ever stayed in an Airbnb? Some of you might be hosts. Well, now you know how the company got its start and where the air comes from in the company name. The air mattresses the first guests stayed on. And by the way, those 2 broke roommates, they're worth over $3 billion now. That's billion with a B. Not a bad origin story, right? I think hearing about the company's humble start helps elicit an emotional response. How often have you had a problem creating an emotional connection with customers? How often have you had a problem selling your products and services? How often have you had a problem getting people to remember what you sell? Origin stories can help. By the end of this morning's presentation, you'll hear a number of origin stories and leave with the tools to create your own. You'll learn the CPR formula for breathing life into your origin stories. In addition, you'll become familiar with the 3 S's and the 3 T's of successful stories that will help you stand out from your competitors. Well, feel free to take notes, but later on we'll be sharing a PDF with my main points. So you might ask, what are origin stories? Well, in general, they're ancient tales about how a tribe or religion or people came to be. They might explain the origin of some natural phenomenon, like the seasons or the stars in the sky, or how the camel got its hump. But in marketing lingo, origin stories are stories about how your company got its start. These stories might be spread by PR people or the media. They might be on the About page on your company website, or they might be printed on your packaging. Have you heard the legend of Gary Erickson? 30 years ago, right here in the Bay Area, Gary was out on a little outing, a 175-mile bike ride, that is. I know, sounds like an American tall tale, doesn't it? So Gary and his buddy are on this epic trek, chowing down on energy bars. And Gary gets to the point where he just can't stomach one more bite. And he has what he now calls the epiphany. He vows to come up with his own better brand of energy bar. In 1992, after 2 years of working on the recipe in his mother's kitchen, Clif Bars is born. That former bicycle mechanic who was living in a garage at the time is now worth $850 million. Any fans of Clif Bars out there? Have you noticed this little saga, the story of how Clif Bars came to be, printed on the wrapper of every Clif Bar? Think it has inspired you to reach for Clif Bars over some other protein bar? Think it might be one reason Clif Bars enjoys about 1/3 of the American energy bar market? Maybe. Maybe. Definitely. And here's the key. Get to the heart by sharing your start. Sharing the story of your humble beginnings helps to make that emotional connection. So does putting your name on the product or naming it after a family member. Clif Bars are named after Gary's dad. Research shows that origin stories will get consumers to rave about your products and services. That's right, rave. RAVE is an acronym for the results your company will gain from having a well-crafted origin story. Give me an R. People will be more likely to remember your company. Give me an A. People will be more likely to act on your product offerings, meaning they'll buy them. Give me a V. With a good origin story, your company's perceived value will rise. Give me an E. People will emotionally connect with your company, like you have with Clif Bars. R-A-V-E. What do you got? Rave. And maybe, just maybe, you'll have a Fortune 500 company on your hands, or at least increased annual revenue. Get to the heart by sharing your start. That's what it's all about. Tell the public how and why your company got started, and your story, your origin story, will help you stand out from your competitors. The same holds true if you're a sole practitioner, a lawyer or accountant or realtor, an electrician or consultant or speaker who's self-employed. I'm willing to bet you've heard and been inspired by Patricia Fripp's origin story, from humble start in a hair salon to celebrated speaker. Get to the heart by sharing your start. Are you a fan of Stacy's Pita chips? Annie's macaroni and cheese? Izzy's soda? Tom's shoes? All of these companies have compelling origin stories. Stories you could tell around a campfire, at a dinner party, in the aisles of a supermarket or department store, or at a conference, trade show, or networking event. Let's start with Stacy's. Back in 1996, Stacy and her then husband Mark ran a sandwich cart in Boston's Quincy Market. Their pita sandwiches were hugely popular, and at lunchtime, people lined up for them. The line stretched around the block, and you could expect to wait in line for upwards of half an hour. Sometimes people would complain about the wait or leave the line and grab lunch elsewhere. That's a problem. How did Stacy and Mark solve it? One night, they took home the leftover loaves of pita bread, cut them into bite-sized chunks, and baked them in the oven. They started handing out pita chips to customers while they waited in line. And guess what? The chips were a hit. People wanted to order them along with their sandwiches. So in 1998, Stacy and Mark started wholesaling pita chips. By 2006, it was a $65 million business, which PepsiCo purchased for $250 million. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Think about the start of Airbnb, Clif Bars, Stacy's Pita Chips. It can be broken down to 3 S's. That's S as in Steve. These entrepreneurs saw a problem, they solved the problem, and they started a company to share their solution with others. Airbnb solved the problem of a shortage of hotel rooms and their own need to pay the rent. Gary Erickson solved the problem of energy bars that didn't taste very good. And Stacy solved the problem of disgruntled customers and the public's insatiable appetite for snacks. Speaking of snacks, have you ever tried the cassava or plantain chips produced by Artisan Tropic? You can get them at Whole Foods, among other places. Their origin story includes the 3 S's in a really personal way. Listen to this from the side of their package. The best things really do come from family. Artisan Tropic started when our daughter, Maka Guzman, was very sick, and we began focusing on drastic dietary changes. This paved her way back to health, and Whole Foods became a new passion for us. Now we're sharing our enthusiasm for nutritious eating, including snacking. Join us on our wholesome adventure. Wow. Instant credibility and emotional connection. And the 3 S's. They saw a problem with their daughter's health, solved the problem with a new diet, and started a company to share the solution with the rest of us. The only thing they didn't do was name the company after their daughter, the way other companies have, like Amy's Kitchen and Izzy's Sodas. What problem have you or your company solved? What solution are you sharing with your customers? I'd like to take a moment to reflect on that. I'd like you to take a moment to reflect on that. And if you're so inclined, share a sentence or two with us in the chat. I'd love to see what some of you have been up to. This is the audience participation section of the program, guys. I'd love to see in the chat if you can share maybe a solution you've come up with in your career. Could be as a realtor, as a manufacturer or salesperson. Anybody willing to share a little bit of your story? If not, we'll move on, but I'd love to see if there is anything in the chat that Janice Litvin says her solution, banish burnout toolkit. All right, so you saw a problem with people not working out enough or perhaps dietary issues, and you came up with this program to solve that problem. Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Janice. Dogs are a great party topic. Oh, that was a response to something else. But that's a solution to that conversation problem, right? Christopher solved the problem of lags in conversation with talking about ice storms and road trips. Okay, so that's something. We see Bill Buchanan shared with us, helping lawyers succeed in court. Excellent. Wow, I'd love to hear more about that. Elaine, showing people how to communicate impromptu and in the moment. Excellent, yeah, because a lot of people struggle with that. You know, and improv, of course, can be great training to help with that as well. So yeah, solutions to problems. Great. Let me get back to the talk. Oh, Betty Tash shared, oh, they're rolling in now. Betty Tash says, helping guide people through transitions in life, buying and selling homes. So she has a special approach to that sets her apart from other realtors. And Richard Correa, getting police mid-level managers to tweet. Okay, I'd love to hear more about that as well. Lynn, wow, you guys are full of participation. It's fantastic. Lynn Fraley, writing about better ways for women to take care of their breasts, including a suggestion to pause with mammograms. Great, very important, fantastic. Seeing a problem, solving a problem, starting an initiative to help solve that problem. Gary McKinsey, how to speak in public to market, to increase your visibility. John Mathers saw a structural problem with small companies and talked with the CEO and rethought it at the start of Birkenstock. Oh, wow, fantastic. Another Bay Area company. Craig Adams, Homes, how to win in a multiple offer world. Okay, wow. Town of Hope, better posture for better help. Suzanne Roane, laid off at SFUSD teacher I was a laid off SFUSD teacher who created a career change workshop for teachers, sponsored by Willie Brown. Got it into the SF Examiner and filled each seat and started my speaking biz after that 40 years ago. Fantastic. That's great. Those are inspiring stories. Linda, I'm going to stop after this one. Linda realized people are lacking joy. Speak and coach people to get their joy back. Started after her daughter's death. She brought so much joy to my life. Wow. That's a moving story right there that is part of your origin story that, you know, is going to definitely grab a lot of people's attention and get them to be customers of your services. That's fantastic. Just going to get back to the talk, and then I'll give you another chance later on to participate if you feel that's just something you want to share. Not every origin story follows the pattern of the 3 S's, seeing a problem, solving it, and starting a company. Sometimes founders choose to tell the story of their scrappy early days when they struggled to stay afloat. That's the case with Annie's macaroni and cheese. The story printed on the box tells us that Annie and her husband Rob used to handle all the shipping themselves. They wrote the addresses for mail orders on the cases by hand, packed up to 50 into their VW, and dropped them off at the post office. Like all origin stories, they're highly effective tools. Stories like that, I meant to say, are a great way to establish a connection with your customers. And like all origin stories, they're highly effective tools for customer acquisition, customer retention, and customer loyalty. Maybe you found that out with your own origin stories already, sharing the kinds of things that many of you just shared in the chat. These stories turn customers into your brand ambassadors who will happily share your story with others. Any fans of Tom's shoes out there? Anybody wearing a pair right now? You might know the company's slogan, one for one. In 2006, the company founder was traveling in Argentina. He saw lots of children growing up without shoes, and he wanted to help. His solution? He started Tom's Shoes, a company that matches every pair of shoes purchased with a new pair of shoes for a child in need. By the way, the company has since expanded to eyewear, bags, and coffee. Some of these company founders sound heroic, don't they? But it's not surprising. Origin stories draw on elements of the hero's journey. The hero's journey is a pattern of storytelling that infuses most Hollywood movies and has been part of the stories we've told, myths and legends and religious tales, for thousands of years. The hero leaves their home and strikes out into the unknown. They face tests and ultimately find a way to slay the dragon or overcome whatever dark force threatened their community. They return home with some elixir, blessing, or transformative message that changes their community for the better. If the hero were an entrepreneur, they'd start a company. Hercules would start a cleaning service for horse stables. Jesus might manufacture a product that changes water into wine. Some of you may use Tom's toothpaste or know someone who does. Some of my best friends brush their teeth with Tom's. Back in 1968, Tom and his wife left Philadelphia for small town life in Maine. They were big fans of natural, unprocessed foods, and they looked around for natural, unprocessed detergent and other personal care products. Guess what? There weren't any. Problem, right? So what did they do? In 1970, they started their own company, Tom's of Maine. Their first product, laundry soap. The toothpaste followed in 1975. The key elements here are essentially what we've already discussed. The 3 S's: see a problem, solve the problem, start a company to share the solution with others. Another way to think of this in terms of the hero's journey is with the 3 T's: tests, triumph, and transformation. Through conflict and challenges and battles and victories, the hero has an epiphany and returns home to share his or her lessons and transformation. That's what entrepreneurs and company founders do. And I'm guessing and can tell many of you have too. That's another cue, guys. I'm going to invite you to write a few sentences of your origin story in the chat. It might be the 3 S's or the 3 T's, or even just 2 of them. Let's spend just a couple minutes looking at those. Again, just the S, some of this is what we've already seen, but if there's something you didn't get to share that you'd like to share, that maybe if you can try to fit it into the formula of the 3 S's or the 3 T's: see a problem, see a problem, solve the problem, start a company to share the solution, or tests, triumph, transformation. I think we can see that certainly in some of the stories that were already shared with Suzanne Roanne's struggle with being laid off, and then how she came back from that, with Linda Shively's dealing with the death of her daughter and recovering from that and coming back from that transformed in a way to share a message that's transforming for others. Betty Taish, helping people find the home of their dreams and Craig doing that as well. And Lynn Fraley sharing these really important lessons. Take care of your breasts and pause with mammograms. So a lot of stuff we've seen already that fits into this formula. Janice Litford, 20-year veteran tech recruiter, fairly sedentary job, I would guess. Recession hit, so she went to the gym and became a Zumba instructor. Wow, fantastic. Then she found that people in the workplace were unhealthy and stressed out, and she went back to where she had come from to share this message of transformation. So yeah, we see tests, triumph, transformation, seeing a problem, solving the problem, sharing the solution with others. Lynn Fraley, who had important lessons from her job as a nurse. Patricia Fripp, the trials of my parents in World War II, and how Winston Churchill got on the radio and with the power of his words gave hope and strength, programmed me to use words to help others. Wow, so there's a person, Winston Churchill, a lot of us see as a hero, who then inspired Patricia Fripp to do a lot of the same work in the world. Excellent. John Mathers, did I say this before? Saw company structural problems, came up with solutions based on human nature, shared the processes, started a company to share those, or a service consultancy perhaps, to share processes with senior management. Great, and wrote a book. So yeah, that's what a lot of heroes do, is they end up writing books as a great way to share their lessons, their transformation with others. That's a great way to get the word out, of course. Suzanne Campy deals with the problem of unemployed people. She goes on to say, unemployed people feel very down on themselves, and Suzanne works with them to help them tell themselves a story of strength, resilience, and extraordinarily powerful self-talk to refine their power and confidence. So that's like helping people get back on their own hero's journey, right? And see themselves as the hero of their own story and get back on track. Betty Taish, supporting women in real estate. Does a lot of other work with women. Fantastic. That's great. Claudette just shared, started my first decade as an abused child in an abusive home and learned how, and now coach how, their insurance, I'm sorry, I just jumped from one chat to another. Learned how and now coach how you can get in touch with and use your personal power. Wow, that's really a classic story and a moving story that's going to tug on a lot of people's heartstrings, and that's compelling. Lynn Fraley, educate employers on more effective ways to direct their insurance funds for better outcomes. Great lesson. I imagine something you learned on your own and then or studied and mastered, and then sharing that with others. Great. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I was wondering, will this group this early in the morning be participatory? Well, have no fear. That's great to see. I'd like to share one of my personal origin stories with you. I'm a speaker, as Patricia said, an English instructor, writer, and actor, or as she said, actor. And I've also worked in sales. She said that too. Selling business publications, real estate, and advertising. Any salespeople attending today's meeting by any chance? Just a shot in the dark.
Yes.
Do you want to hear how I got my start? Good answer.
Okay.
In my late 20s, I was acting in a play, playing a salesman. And no, it wasn't Death of a Salesman. And sometimes audience members would tell me how persuasive I was and that I'd make a great salesman. I filed that information away. 2 years later, I followed an Israeli girlfriend to Tel Aviv. My savings were running low, but I wasn't ready to come home. I needed a job. But first, the beach. I had picked up a tourist magazine in a hotel. I leafed through it, more for a distraction than anything else. Most of the pages, as you can guess, were full of ads. Somebody had to sell them, right? I remembered what those audience members had said to me, and it hit me. I could sell advertising. I got the job, and I got to go out on sales calls with my boss and watch him turn no's into yeses. Soon enough, I was doing the same thing. When I moved to the Bay Area 15 years, guess what my first job was? Selling ads for the East Bay Express. Great skills to have because we're always selling. If you're out there selling, you're going to run into someone who's buying. Pretty much, right? Great skills to have. That was my boss in Tel Aviv. Always said that there are two human activities, buying and selling. And if you're out there selling, you're going to run into somebody who's buying. Anytime you, as you know, anytime you're up for a new job or relationship, you have to sell yourself. As a speaker, an actor, I do that a lot. Having a good origin story can help. In classic tales, the hero spends time and grows in a dungeon or cave or belly of a whale, or while living abroad. That's where the hero struggles and figures things out. The equivalent of that in American corporate mythology, the garage. We've all heard the story of the first Apple computer being created in a garage. While working on the Clif Bars recipe, Gary Erickson was living in a garage. Other companies that started out in a garage include Hewlett-Packard, the Walt Disney Company, Mattel, and Amazon. Let's get back to you and your origin stories. I want you to leave today's meeting with some pointers, tips, and techniques for writing or improving your own stories. You're about to learn how to breathe life into your origin stories with CPR. CPR is an acronym for conflict, plot, and resolution. The basic building block, of course, is plot. First this happened, then that happened, and then that happened. In the early days of your company, when it was just being formed, maybe before it was formed, what people were involved? What was the setting? What problem did you set out to solve? That's where the conflict comes in. The problem is the conflict, the story engine. The founders of Airbnb had a conflict. They couldn't pay the rent. Gary Erickson had a conflicted relationship with energy bars. Stacy faced disgruntled customers. The founder of Tom's Shoes struggled to solve the problem of shoeless kids. The creators of Tom's toothpaste didn't want to use toothpaste that was full of chemicals. These entrepreneurs struggled to solve these problems and came up with great solutions, which is the resolution of their stories. Every great story needs one, even funny ones. What I'm about to share with you is really the subject of another presentation, but humor is a great way to connect with customers and establish a bond. To give you an example and to provide some comic relief, listen to the origin story printed inside the top of the egg carton from Uncle Eddie's wild hen farm in Petaluma. Things were moving so fast that I don't know when it happened. All I know is that Uncle Eddie had all of our nieces and nephews in the hen house with catcher's mitts, and the wild hens were up in the rafters, as usual, and everybody was catching eggs as fast as they could. And I said to Uncle Eddie, these eggs aren't just for our friends and neighbors anymore. And it looks like we're in the egg business. And as he dove past me, making an heroic catch for an old codger, he yelled out, I hate to admit it, Daisy, but I think you're right. All that and a carton of eggs too. Conflict, plot, resolution. Breathe life into your origin stories with CPR. I'm an English instructor, but don't worry, I'm not going to give you guys an assignment, but consider this an invitation. Later today, while enjoying a cocktail or a cup of tea, on the phone or in person, tell your friend or significant other the story of how you got started doing what you do. And they'll be like, again? And ask them to tell you theirs. And then, if you try this technique, free writing. Free writing is a great way to begin working on your origin story or any piece of writing. Set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes and write nonstop until the time's up. Write with pen and paper or on your laptop or iPad, whatever works best for you. While exploring your roots, the early days of your business, your humble start, don't be afraid to be vulnerable and dig deep. Here's an idea from one of my mentors, gifted speaker Craig Valentine. Write about the 4 F's frustrations, flaws, failures, and firsts. Think about how each F is related to the beginning of your company or career. Do a separate free write for each one: frustrations, flaws, failures, and firsts. You'll generate lots of useful material this way. Would you like another prompt? Use the journalist's 5 W's. Write about the who, what, where, when, and why of how your company came to be. What was your epiphany or big bang, the moment you knew your brand must be born? Before we launch into the Q&A, let me recap. But first, you guys have been such a great audience. I'd like to give one of you a complimentary 1-hour consultation during which I'll work with you on creating or improving your origin story. To win this free prize valued at $200, be the first to type the answer to the following question in the chat. Are you ready? On your mark, get set, go. When he got the idea for Clif Bars, Gary Erickson was on a long bike ride. How long was it? Put your answer in the chat. That is, if you'd like to win. All right, I see Michael Sarah, the first one to put in 175. Close second was Linda Shively. Yeah, she said 170. Elaine Long, Bob Bednar's. A lot of people got the 175. But Michael Sarah's first. So congratulations, Michael. We'll connect later so we can be in touch and I can help you in an hour consultation, help you craft or improve your origin story. Congrats. To recap, those problems you may have had with creating an emotional connection with customers, selling your products and services, or getting people to remember what you sell, all that is behind you. Armed with your origin story, your very own mini saga, you'll get customers to rave about your company and your products and services. They'll remember you, act on your offers, value you, and emotionally connect. Remember the key components of these marketing messages? The 3 S's and the 3 T's. See a problem, solve the problem, start a company to share that solution with others. Or in more heroic terms, tests, triumph, and transformation. Breathe life into your origin stories with CPR, conflict, plot, and resolution. And the next time you book a place through Airbnb or reach for a Clif Bar or grab a bag of Stacy's Pita chips, think about their origin stories and what sets them apart. I hope later today you'll get started on your origin story. My email is in the PDF I'll be sharing, and I'll put it in the chat so you can follow up with me if you'd like to work together on your origin story. And also, please reach out if you know of a company or organization that might like to have me in to speak or lead a seminar. And remember, get to the heart by sharing your start, even if it wasn't in a garage. Thank you.
That was absolutely wonderful, Steve. Amazing, incredible. Janice Litvin got people up dancing at 8:15 in the morning, but you got the most participation in the chat. So congratulations. Wow. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Michael Sarah for paying such good attention. So I now open it up and Craig will be in charge of who is raising their hand, and I'll put this on gallery view. You could physically put your hand up. So who wins the first question? Put your hand up and then mute yourself.
Okay, I think, well, Michael Sarah actually, won the chat award. So Michael, why don't you go ahead and say something since you're the winner.
Steve, thank you very much. I'm glad I paid attention. But like you said, right? I mean, that origin story is something that it resonates, and so you remember. And so when you told that story, it really resonated. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I look forward to working with you.
Likewise, me too, Michael.
Yeah, Steve, that was great. And by the way, we recorded the session today, and we'll record it a little bit longer with the Q&A. So, and this is one I'm going to come back to and revisit. So I think there's a tremendous amount of value there. So thanks again, Steve. A great effort today.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure. And thanks to Tony, who's not here, who invited me, and Patricia Fripp, who listened to my speech on Friday. Thanks for the advice, Patricia. I see your hand raised.
Yeah. So
yes, and
yeah. So I was just going to say, Patricia's. I'll go on to Patricia in just a moment. We have lots of screens here because we still have 45 people on the call. So I'll do my best to see you with your hand raised, but I think there may be a hand raise function too. So use that if we have access to it. And go ahead, Patricia.
yes, if you hit the reactions, I know yes, mine worked. Good. When you, by the way, I put in the chat a couple of times the link to Steve's handout that you can download from Tony's Dropbox. Hey. When you work with someone on a origin story, what is your first question?
Tell me how you got started.
All right. Because I always ask clients, well, to go back to the real beginning, what did your parents do and what advice? So how you began your business, or?
Yeah, let's go back to the beginning, and what inspired you to do what you do? What were you struggling with early on that somehow led you to choose your career path or start that company? There's a lot of great, a lot of questions that can be fruitful. Mainly, I want to try to sit down with the person and just have a conversation and let their personality come out and just hear them talk. And then through talking together for a while, we can start to figure out the outlines of the story.
Good, Craig. I can't see any hands virtually or visually.
I always know Betty always has a question.
Yes.
So.
Where is Betty? Actually, I'm taking notes about the first, tell me how you got started. Sometimes the stories are so long and very convoluted of how one gets started in their current profession or with their ideas. How does one, that's always been my problem, narrowing it down to a few succinct thoughts or comments. So I guess I do have a question.
So is your question how to narrow it down to a few succinct thoughts and comments? I think looking at the formula can help, looking at what are the 3 S's? Can you nail it down to the 3 S's or the 3 T's? Working with a free write, of course, you need to free write first and brainstorm. And as Craig Valentine likes to say, first you make a mess and then you find the message in the mess. So I think that's what you do when you're working with somebody else. Sometimes you can't find it on your own, but working with someone else can help spot, the really specific details that are the most important, the ones that will really grab an audience's attention or customer's attention. And certainly, from just based on what you shared, Betty, in the chat, I can see that you have the elements of a great story.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Patricia.
Well, Janice has her hand up, and this would be my second. So Janice is first.
I just wanted, Steve, for you to tell the listeners about your theater show and maybe do a 1-minute clip of one of your characters, because that is really, really fun. And I think people would, I had the pleasure of seeing Steve about 1.5 years ago over here in the East Bay.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up and for putting me on the spot. Yeah, if some of you know, I have a one-man show called What They Said About Love. It's a show I created from interviews. I interviewed a lot of couples, and I play multiple couples in my show, and also I play like over a dozen characters, and also weave in my own story of a particular love interest. So it's an hour-long show that is available for booking on Zoom. And it ran for I think 2 months or more, close to 4 months actually, at the Marsh in San Francisco and Berkeley in 2018. Last summer, I had the honor of taking it to London, performing at the Canal Cafe Theatre in London for 4 shows. And I've traveled around the country a little bit with the show. So yeah, to do a little bit of it though. Wow, you want me to do a little bit of the show? Let me think. Yeah, that's a great question. Okay. Well, one of the things I asked couples who I interviewed was I asked them, what irritates you about each other? And that made for a good little segment of the show that's people tend to find pretty entertaining. So I'll give you one of those, a snippet of one of those couples. This is Alec, this is the couple named Gabby and Matt. Gabby and Matt. Something that irritates us about each other? Sponges. You're going to say sponges. I'm going to say sponges, and you're going to say the blowing of my nose. Oh, that's right. I forgot about blowing his nose. But yes, oh my God, he does not know how to blow his nose quietly. When he blows it, it's like a moose is in the house. It's like a wild animal. It's like a mating call. I'm like, just do it quietly. I can't. He can't. He doesn't know how. He does not know how, and it drives me nuts. It's just a little taste. He goes on to say how much it annoys him that, he's got two sponges, the counter sponge and the cutting board sponge. And he's always, like, she doesn't just rinse them off. He always finds them with schmutz on them. So anyway, thanks for bringing that up.
Well, there was a method to my madness. The reason I brought it up is because Judy Carter, who many of the NSA people here know, a comedian and a speaker coach, teaches that the way to before you get into the emotional part of your story is to grab them with a little bit of humor. And so the best way I've found is to act out my critical Jewish mother. And you sort of pick that up with your characters there. And then that grabs their attention. Then I get into the pain that I experienced as a child growing up, having to be perfect. So anyway, it was just a way to add to your lessons here.
That's great. That sounds like a great approach, Janice, for sure. I'd love to hear that critical Jewish mother. I think a couple
What
of
other questions do we have?
Yeah.
Who else has got a question? Patricia, I think you were going to say something.
Well, I'm always fascinated how actors remember their lines. Now, it's one thing if you wrote the play yourself, it's rather like writing your own speech, it's easier to remember. But if you take a role from a screenwriter, how do you memorize it? Because you can't be a little off if other actors are responding to you.
This is true. A lot of it is repetition, the same way, some of the basics, the way you might study for a test initially, just memorizing facts and figures, the same way you memorize the words. But a lot of it comes out kind of more organically and naturally through rehearsal and muscle memory, because you're doing the scenes over and over again in rehearsal, and you're playing off of the other actor, and it starts, back and forth. So a lot of it's repetition. It's not that much of a secret to it. I think beyond that, different actors, of course, have different techniques. Some people like to record the dialogue on their, say phone or recording device, and then play it with pauses. After they'll record the other actor's lines, then have a pause so they can try to come in with their line, and then have their lines recorded. So there's different ways to do it. But for me, it's mostly eyeballing the text. And I think I have a little bit of a photographic memory, which helps. But basically, it's repetition. So, yeah.
What other questions do we have this morning? Any other hands?
Well, why don't we ask Mr. President for people to put their hand up if they think they have an origin story, whether they use it or not, just to see who's already using one in some way or another. Let's have a look.
Yeah, I think we can all pretty much raise our hand on that one. It's just how do you implement it, which is one of the brilliant things about your presentation today, Steve. And I liked your use of acronyms, because it's always good to have a mnemonic device to remember the different things. So I thought that was great.
Thank you.
Linda, I think you have an idea. You had your hand up.
And Tana has her hand up.
Yes. So do you want me to share it? Or?
Yes, and then
please.
Tana. Yeah.
So in 2005, I had to make a tough decision of how to escape an abusive marriage with my severely handicapped 3-year-old daughter, Jessica. And just 2 weeks later, I held her in my arms as she took her last breath and died.
Hey.
From that point on, I struggled to see any kind of future for myself. And I realized there was one missing key, one missing ingredient that we all need. And without it, we can't do anything. Nothing really works. And that secret ingredient is joy. And once you have it, things work. But without it, nothing seems to work. And so today, I speak about joy. I help coach people to get their joy back and be able to have them move forward in their life so they can help more people.
Wow.
And
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter, but I know Linda. I've run into you so many times, and you are full of joy. And, you know, and I think that's your gift back to the world. So, you know, I really appreciate what you just said. Tana?
For me, I went to perfect posture class, and I was so shocked because classroom full of old people learning the basic functions of life, like walking, breathing, and basically relearning at such an older age after experiencing such a problems with your body and pain. And that inspired me to look into the posture problem, especially when my perfect posture teacher pointed out that I was holding my head wrong way. And I'm going, I had no idea. For decades, I was holding my head wrong way, not being the best self I could be. And I'm going, wow, something that we all think we know how, what to do, how to do, we really don't know because we were born without body user manual as an operator. So that got me going into studying about how body works and so on. And then I learned that poor posture and also sedentary lifestyle are the cause of the life for human being. Sedentary disease killing more than 5 million people per year as an underlying cause of the disease. And that just fired me up to tell the world, guys, it's so easy to fix. We can fix the scanner, which is eye, and there's a simple exercise we can do, and we can correct the scanner, broken scanner problem. Oh, so that's what got me started. Easy thing to do and huge results. So that's, yeah, realizing that I was holding my head wrong was the origin of the my story.
Wow.
Thank you.
now, if nobody else has their hand up, I would love to put Rich Correa on the spot, because he at the Breakfast Club once told us a great story that I've never forgotten that would be great in any speech and could be built into the origin story of his career. Is, remember when you were young, Rich, and had to guard the prisoners and you forgot to lock the gates, and someone you'd been to school with came out and said, hey, he was locked up? Can you remember that story?
Like I remember my children's names. Did you want me to tell that? I mean,
yes.
So,
and then Steve can tell you if that would be the classic of how you got to be as important as you are.
well, I have another one, but I'm going to go with yours, Patricia, just because I'm loath to disagree with you, particularly in a public forum. So I was a young deputy sheriff. I turned 21 and got a job in a jail, in the Marin County Jail, and just a kid. And they gave me the rules. And anyway, I was returning a bunch of prisoners to their cells one day, and I opened the box where they control everything and sent them down. And there's red lights and green lights in the box. So the prisoners stand outside their cells, and you open the doors in a bunch of them by flipping switches, and in they go. And then you flip the switches back and the lights turn green. Well, I don't know how I did it. I must have been very cocky. I was probably a month on the job, and I missed that there was a red light in the green, which meant, I guess, a door was open, but I didn't notice it. So I was out in front with the deputies telling a story when appears a fellow named Tom. God, I can't remember his last name. I should remember. Anyway, Tom and I were in junior high school together, and Tom was going to state prison for a robbery, and I was the deputy sheriff. And Tom Flannery came out and said to me, "Rich, you left the door open," with 6 people in the cell. It would have been the end of me. And one of those life's lessons, and you never know when you're going to cross paths with people and how important different relationships are. So Tom Flannery is still in prison all these years later, and I might have been with him had he not come out and told me that the cell door was. To this day, I don't know how in a blink of 50 green lights, I missed a red one. That's my story. Patricia?
Steve, could you see that as an opening scene in the story of his career?
Absolutely. Maybe it's got the great humor that is so important for connecting with an audience, and it shows his humble start, and people can connect, to being imperfect and making mistakes, especially early on. And it has a lot of great elements. It's a great story.
Steve, and for everybody here, I flunked the 7th grade, and 8 years ago, I was invited back to my high school to be inducted into their Hall of Fame. And I stepped up on the stage with 300 graduating students, and I said, "Wow, can you believe all the stuff I've done?" And then I turned sideways and I said, "And I flunked the 7th grade." And someone in the audience said to me, "It's okay." And I think that, setting your humble roots and your failures and your mistakes out there is just a great platform. Your talk today really resonated in me.
Great. I'm glad to hear that.
I'll say something.
Thank you, Richard.
Hey, Rich, by the way, 7th grade, the best 3 years of my high school education. Okay.
You know how I passed the 7th grade eventually? My father said, "What'll it take?" And I said, "I'd like a motorcycle." And he says, "If you pass the 7th grade, I'll get you a motorcycle." I was 13 and he bought me a motorcycle.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Claudette had something to share. Claudette?
I just wanted to say that thank you very much for the presentation, because it's good. I have used my origin story for a speech contest, but I've been reluctant to use it when I'm dealing with clients because it's sad. And I wanted to thank Janice Litvin for the suggestion of starting out with a humor, something humorous, just to carry you through, because there's a point to the story. And I think using it would be a good idea, Steve, but I'm reluctant to use it to not put a damper on things right away.
Yeah, I think that's something you can work on with a coach in terms of delivery and who the audience is. Of course, it depends on the audience and the overall message of the talk. But yeah, it's definitely a concern. But yeah,
I have a story.
Susan has her hand raised.
Yeah. Well, this is not a lot to be proud of, but I really am. I went to the University of Illinois, and I was Champaign, but with Urbana, and I was on Academic Pro twice. So when I was invited back to speak at Authors Come Home, the thing that I said with the chancellor there was what an honor it was to be there to speak, especially as I had been on Academic Pro twice, which proves that grades does not have anything to do with success. And the chancellor was like fainting that I said that. But I look at some of the people that got great grades and I'm going, look at what they're doing. But it's to own up, like I was a better student when I came here and had to go to San Francisco State for my master's, but I pride myself, and I always will hold up How to Work a Room saying, you see, you don't have to be a good student to write a good book.